Greetings, Zimbabwe, and welcome to your favorite program, Power Talk. My name is Sean Moyo. Today on the program, we host a very prominent Zimbabwean. He hardly needs an introduction. Honorable Tendai Biti is the former Minister of Finance during the GNU era. He is the former Member of Parliament for Harare East constituency, and he's a well-accomplished lawyer, as well as being the former Vice President of the main opposition. Honorable Biti, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Perfect. Getting straight into it, maybe if we just clear this out at the go. Honorable, why have you decided to take a political sabbatical from the Zimbabwean political scene?
Well, look, I've explained that I've got things that I have to do, like writing and certain commitments. So that is inconsistent with my role in any political space. So I've explained it.
Right, perfect. And getting into the economic question right now, having followed you for a long time, you seem to always be on point when it comes to the diagnosis of the economy and the outcomes. May you kindly maybe just advise Zimbabweans in a nutshell what you think of the current measures by the government to introduce the new currency, the ZIG, as well as all the measures around that?
I think the move to introduce a new currency, the structured currency as they're calling it, the ZIZ Currency as they're calling it, is just a complete disaster. We argued in 2019 when through Statutory Instrument 33 of 2019 they introduced the RTGS dollar, that conditions for the introduction of our own currency and conditions for de-dollarization simply did not exist. We argued at the time that we did not have sufficient reserves to actually back up a currency. We argued at the time that the balance of payment position, the current account position, and more particularly, the huge demand for imports into Zimbabwe, which now exceeds $8 billion US dollars, would simply delegitimize any currency. But we argued most significantly that there was simply no trust and confidence in the government, in Mthuli Ncube, in Emmerson Mnangagwa, in the government of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and that without trust, without a social contract, that currency would fail. It's now back to deja vu. We're back to square zero. The ZIG is being introduced after a legacy, a long-standing legacy of failed currencies. The bearer check, the gold notes, the Zimbabwean dollar, the bond note, the RTGS dollar, they've all been bastardized. And they've been bastardized by the government itself, which has not been able to live within its means. At the epicenter of the destruction of those currencies has been an expansionary fiscal policy that has generated massive growth in broad money, massive growth in money supply, in the money base. ZIG is caught up in the same shadow. Up to December of 2023, broad money in Zimbabwe, they grew by over 1,000%. They say about 800%, but you and I know better. It grew by over 1,000%. They can't live within their means. And as I'm talking to you right now, they are in a serious war. They are in a serious war. I'll come back to this war, the huge deficit that they have. So in short, then secondly, they don't have reserves. They say in the monetary policy statement that they've got about 2.1 tons of gold, costing 185 million US dollars, plus 100 million US dollar reserve. That's cash reserves. That's about 385 million dollars. If the population of Zimbabwe is 16 billion dollars, 16 million people, you divide that's almost like $3 per person. $3 per person. What you and I require. And remember, our imports are now more than US $800 billion. If you read the monetary policy statement read out by John Part 2. That means that we've got less than 11 days of import cover. But we also have to take with a pinch of salt even the claim that they've got US $100 million cash. I say so for the good reason that they already owe 37 weeks of unpaid auction allotments. 37 weeks, which is well in excess of 800 million US dollars. So they owe the market in excess of US 800 million dollars.
And that is locally.
In unpaid, that's local. In unpaid auction foreign currency allocations, right, which they've now cruelly converted into a non-negotiable certificate of deposits, NNCDs, at an interest rate of 7.5%, but they've been converted to ZIG. Right. The 800 million US dollars has now been converted to ZIG, which from a constitutional point of view is an unlawful appropriation, unlawful compulsory acquisition of whoever is owed money, which is in breach of Section 7(1) of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. And I hope the business people that are owed, whoever is owed, will have the guts of taking them to the Constitutional Court, because unlawfully converting their US dollars and pretending that the ZIG and the US dollar are on par is a fiction. So it's unfair. So I doubt if they would owe 800 million US dollars to unpaid and unhonored auction allowances. They would have a pocket of US $100 million anyway. So I take that with a pinch of salt. But even if it's true, as I said, 385 million US dollars is worth of import cover, cover is not good enough. So ZIG is starting on a negative base of delegitimization. They say in their monetary statement that, well, ZIG is sufficient, the reserves are sufficient to provide 3 times a cover of the currency. We're waiting to see how much money they're going to print. I wish we had a currency board, because the true function of a currency board is then to ensure that the money that has been printed and issued is actually backed by reserves, and wherever there's a reduction in the reserve, there's actually withdrawal of so that at any time the things are on par. Right. But this government, they're spending money as if it grows on trees, so they will never be able to have that discipline. But the fact of the matter is that ZIG is not backed. But of course, you and I know that the biggest challenge to ZIG is that no one trusts it, no one believes it. In the 4 or 5 days that it has been introduced, the rate is now trading at 1:22. Yeah, that's just ridiculous. So if you leave it, I'm not a prophet, but in some of these things, I know a lot of 1 or 2 things. I think by September it will be 1:100. That's why they are now sending people physically to arrest money changers in 4th Street. But you can't arrest the market. Right. You can't arrest the market forces. The other year we saw Prof as Minister of Trade fighting inflation by raiding stores such as OK Macro. It didn't work and it won't work. You can't arrest the market forces.
Right, Honorable, you spoke about the government being in a war. Maybe you can shed a bit of light on what you would mean by they are in a serious war.
Look, let's just look at short-term challenges. They owe about 800 million US dollars in respect of unpaid
auction
allotments. Now, we now know that the Reserve Bank was borrowing money from exporters with the payment being guaranteed by export surrender requirements.
Right.
That's what they were doing.
Right.
So even though export surrender requirements have now been shifted from the Ministry of Finance, so from the Reserve Bank to the Ministry of Finance, the fact of the matter is that much of the export surrender requirements are already being swallowed by the borrowing that John Part 1 had already done in the market. How much is that? I've seen estimates that range from 500 million to $1 billion. I think it's more than $1 billion, in my respectful opinion. So you've got $1 billion from advanced export surrender requirements. You've got $800 million from unhonored allocations of unhonored auction allocations. That's already almost $2 billion US dollars. Then you have got government debt to the quasi-fiscal indebtedness of the Reserve Bank that was transferred to the Ministry of Finance last year. Then you have got obligations that arose from of August 2023. Then you've got challenges that are rising from climate shocks, the 2023-2024 drought.
Right.
So my suspicion is that there's a huge war of more than $2 billion US dollars. My suspicion is that they've already raided foreign currency sitting in banks. And my suspicion is that, just like in the past, many of the accounts that are now that are FCA accounts in banks are actually mirror accounts. They are mirror accounts. The money was already stolen. The money was already taken. If I'm wrong on this, and I submit that I'm not wrong, I challenge the new Reserve Bank governor to carry out a forensic audit on the monies actually reflected in bank accounts and money physically being held. There will be a gap. So I suspect that they are in a huge war, an unconstitutional war, an illegal war, and we are in a mess, an absolute mess. And as I like to say, a dog's breakfast, but one which many dogs would not touch by a mile. Certainly not my own dogs. That is the position.
Right. As a former Minister of Finance and Head of Treasury, do you think the current Treasury team, the Minister, as well as the Governor, have sufficient capacity, number one, number two, leverage, and number three, independence to perform according to what they think works, or they are hamstrung by the politics?
No. Mthuli is a complicit instrument in the destruction of this economy. It eludes one's wisdom that one can actually use the phrase Professor of Economics in the same line with his name, Mthuli Ncube. What he does is a complete reflection of vacuousness, a complete reflection of cluelessness, but most importantly, a very cruel a mindset that is totally out of reach with the realities of Zimbabwe. I mean, take, for instance, these revenue measures. Why would you introduce horrible things such as the intermediated money transfer tax? Why would you introduce horrible things such as the wealth tax, which will only simply punish poor owners of residential properties? If you want to charge and levy wealth tax, why not impose wealth tax on factories on mines, on industrial parks,
Right.
on shares. But that's where the wealth is, not my own poor mother's little house in Kennedy Drive, Greendale. So that alone shows that he has no empathy, he has no relation with the realities that our people are suffering, and perhaps it's because he stayed too many years out of his country. He's not even bothered to bring his own family back to Zimbabwe so that it can suffer like all of us. George Guamatanga is just he's a treasury man. By treasury, I mean he spent a lot of time in the treasury of a bank. So all he knows is money. He doesn't know policy. Yeah, he doesn't know policy. And that's a disaster.
Right. And again, as a former head of the Treasury, Honorable Biti, we saw the government showcasing what was termed the reserves. Looking at that, the couple of bars of gold we saw, does that really reflect what we as a country really own, or perhaps there could have been changes along the way? When you were Finance Minister, did you have access to these vaults to see what we have, and versus what we saw on TV? Does that really reflect what an entire nation can claim to be its reserve?
Yeah, that's true. They have nothing. They have nothing. They too accept that they have nothing. They say they've got 2.1 tons, they have nothing. But I think the real issue is that this country is producing gold.
Right.
This country is producing gold for a long time, from 1980 to let's say 2018. We're producing about 9 tons of gold per year. But now the country is producing over 30 tons of gold per year. But as we know, there's massive leakages of our gold. We saw this through the Al Jazeera documentary on the gold mafia. I think that was just a tip of the iceberg.
Right.
I think that was just a tip of the iceberg. Some experts actually say that 70% of the gold being refined at Rand Gold Refinery in South Africa is actually coming from Zimbabwe. It's actually coming from Zimbabwe. So there is so much leakage such that the gold that is being formally accounted for is not reflective of the gold. I would like to submit that, and there's some evidence to show that gold of at least $1 billion is leaking across Beitbridge border post alone every year. We saw the other day a lady smuggling gold bars at the Harare International Airport. If you've got the audacity of actually doing that in open broad daylight, can you imagine now what is happening to those little aeroplanes that we now see parked literally permanently at Robert Mugabe International Airport? So I would like to believe that our gold and our precious minerals, particularly diamonds and gold and lithium, are the subject of illicit financial flows. Some experts, estimate that we lose about $3 billion in illicit financial flows per year. I would like to think that it's much more than that. I saw the other day the Minister of Mines, Honorable Zanu, saying that we earned $20 billion from minerals alone in 2023. I don't think it's true, but if it's true, we have nothing to show for it.
Right.
Look at the state of our hospitals. We hardly have any cancer machine in our hospitals, any radiotherapy machine in our hospitals. Look at the state of our roads. Look at the state of the energy sector. We have nothing to show for this because of the huge illicit financial flows and the huge theft of our minerals that is taking place in Zimbabwe. Look at how they've refused to ensure that there's value addition of lithium in Zimbabwe, of platinum in Zimbabwe. 44 years after independence, we still don't have a platinum refinery in Zimbabwe, and notwithstanding the fact that platinum is a metal can actually be refined in an adjusted Bindura nickel refinery. Nobody wants to use it. So we are losing billions of dollars as a country through illicit financial flows.
Right, Honorable Biti, if I'm to ask, with all these problems that you've highlighted and they are very visible to every Zimbabwean, what is the actual solution that needs to be implemented? And do you think there is that political will for that to happen?
I'll go into the economics, right. The technical economics. Yes. But I want to tell you that without fixing the politics, the country, nothing will change. So it is the politics. We have to fix the politics. There has to be constitutional change of government in this country. As it put it simply, Zanu Pf must go, because Zanu Pf is at the center of the economic malaise, the economic capture, the economic hubris that has been arresting this country since 1980. So the symbol panacea to Zimbabwe's structural crisis of 5 decades is democracy. Right. So beyond that now, let me come to the economics, because that is what you want to hear. Yes. I would like to respectfully submit that we need to urgently address the economic vitals of the country, in particular the exchange rate fiasco and currency reform and the issue of inflation. So in that regard, the immediate short-term solution with all its challenges is that we need to dollarize. We need to simply dollarize, pay civil servants in US dollars. We are receiving a lot of money as US dollars. Mm-hmm. So 2023, we received almost 11 billion US dollars.
Just last year?
Last year, $11 billion. About $6 billion came from exports. Right. That's a lot of money. Diaspora remittances were almost 1.8, almost $2 billion. $2 billion. Then overseas development assistance, including money channeled through NGOs, another chunk, all in all, 11 billion US dollars. So we've got sufficient money to actually finance in the short term US dollar circulation. Number two, we should simply have stuck with the Zimbabwean dollar, maintain the Zimbabwean dollar. But what was critical were 3 things. The first is to scrap in their interior export surrender requirements. They create distortions. You and I know that they create distortions. Number 2, scrap the auction system completely. Number 3, float that Zimbabwean dollar. Float that Zimbabwean dollar. Why do you need the Zimbabwean dollar? You need the Zimbabwean dollar for domestic, currency. Why do you need the Zimbabwean dollar? You need the Zimbabwean dollar because the Zimbabwean dollar has been an instrument of arbitrage. So the Zimbabwean dollar was used to steal on the action flow from June of 2019. So dealers were using the RTGS to steal the US dollar. So you don't want to reward them. So you don't want to demonetize the Zimbabwean dollar so that you reward these fatty tsotis, the Scott Sakupanyas of this world, to name a few, and others who are going around donating motor vehicles as if motor vehicles are confetti. So that's why you don't want to demonetize the Zimbabwean dollar, but you float it, and of course you restrain its control. Number 3, and this is very key. You need to restore the savings bank in Zimbabwe. How can Zimbabwe expect to survive when there are no savings in Zimbabwe? I notice in the monetary policy statement that interest rates have been reduced to 20% from 130%, but savings rates are being kept at 7%. So John Part 2, like John Part 1, has absolutely no appreciation of the importance of savings. A developing country like Zimbabwe requires savings that are at least 25% of GDP. China, the world's second largest economy, has got savings that are at least 50% of GDP. The ordinary average Zimbabwean needs to be able to put money in a bank, and that money has to have a return. So you need the structural reform of the banking sector. The banking sector is making super profits. The average bank is making profits of 180 million US dollars from non-interest income. Therefore, our banking sector is structurally flawed. There has to be reform of the banking sector so that we have savings, and a bank exists to save clients. If you open a bank account, they will follow you 3 months later and say, "Yo, there's no money in your bank account," notwithstanding that you have a problem. That is why appointing a banker as central bank to address his own problem, it's a problem, because a mosquito can never cure malaria. It doesn't happen. It won't happen. The Zimbabwean banking sector requires structural reform. It's miscued, it's misaligned, and it's not operating like a bank. It's become a predatory institution.
Right.
Then, so these are short-term things around monetary policy that requires. I also think that the Banking Act, the Reserve Bank Act, needs to be amended so that the supervision of banks is carried out by a new independent board. Because the contradiction that you have at the present moment is that the Reserve Bank is the one that registers banks. It also is the one that supervises them. There must be a separation between the registration function and the supervision functions. Most countries have got what is called a FSA, Financial Securities Authority. Right. We already have a Securities Exchange Commission, SEC. I believe that in the short term, the supervision of banks should be delegated to SEC, or perhaps you create a new super regulator that combines IPEC and SEC to regulate both the securities market, the pension market, and the banking sector. Right. But there's a weak regulatory framework in Zimbabwe, and part of the problem is that there's always incest between the central bank and the banking sector. And part of the incest comes from the fact that the chief executive of the central bank is an actual chief executive of a bank. It doesn't work, and it won't work. So the issue of regulation is very critical. Then the issue of inflation. Inflation needs to be addressed by two things. Number one is the dealing with fiscal consolidation. The government must live within its means, or as I used to argue, we eat what we kill. But because they are not capable of doing that, let's have legislative reform. Let's amend the Public Debt Management Act so that we limit and we put a cap on the budget deficit that the government can. Okay, it mustn't be 2% of GDP. We put a cap. We amend Section 11 of the Banking Act and stop the government from borrowing at all or running an overdraft with the central bank. And I would also submit that we should put criminal sanctions. If the Minister of Finance or whoever or the Secretary of Finance breaches the law, there must be those penalties. So putting a cap on borrowing and public expenditure and broad money supply legally should be done. It has been done in other countries where there's been rampant fiscal ill discipline. I think we need to do that. So if we control money supply And if we have fiscal consolidation, we are halfway to dealing with the challenge of inflation. The second issue will be productivity.
Right.
Productivity. You have inflation if too much money is chasing too few goods.
Yes.
So control the money aspect, broad money supply, but also control the goods. Produce. So there has to be structural attention to the real sectors of the economy. There has to be structural attention to the real sectors of the economy. We need to give incentives to producers.
Right.
We need to give incentives to the manufacturing sector. We need to set up trade funds that offer cheap capital to producers, to manufacturers, and so forth. We need to promote value chains. Value chains. In the CCC manifesto of 2024, we had over 42 value chains in the length and breadth of the economy. We need value addition, particularly in the commodities sector. Particularly in the commodity sectors, in the mining sectors, where we need the forward, special linkages, backward linkages, forward linkages, and so forth. Value addition is essential. We need a lithium refinery, a platinum refinery, a chrome refinery. And we can't allow the outrageous situation that our base minerals are being exported in their raw form. And as I always said, unless we change the accumulation model, we have a problem. The accumulation model is based on extraction. Right now, we've produced about 200 million kilograms of tobacco. 90% of it is going to be exported in raw form outside Zimbabwe. So we need to increase production, but also change the accumulation model. I always argue that if you were to work Cecil John Rhodes, who died in 1901, he would not be lost by Rhodesia. He will not be lost by Zimbabwe, because the accumulation model simply still remains one of extraction and extraction. Right. So this is deep economics. We need to alter and change the accumulation model. It is key, it is important, and it is the future. Next, we need to deal with the issue of Zimbabwe's sovereign debt. Our debt in real terms is probably over 42 billion US dollars. Yes. Although they'll tell you that our debt is around 18 billion US dollars. That's another area where there should be a forensic audit. What is that which we actually owe? But it doesn't matter what we owe. What matters is that there has to be a resolution of the debt crisis. The current re-engagement talks, I saw President Chisano being dragged to Washington, D.C. I saw President Adesina of the African Development Bank being dragged to Washington to meet with Christina Georgieva, the head of the IMF. It's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time, as long as we don't have the political will to actually deal with the issue of our resources. We are currently, of our debt, we are currently negotiating a staff monitored program, but in the week that the IMF is here for an Article 4 consultation, we introduce the Tokoloshi called the ZIZ. Are we out of our minds? It's ridiculous, it's crazy, it's insane, but that's the reality of Zimbabwe. So a staff monitored program is out of the question because of our self-induced policy insanity, if you like. But the bottom line is that we have to have a permanent solution to Zimbabwe's debt crisis. And regrettably, what we owe now to the Paris Club of creditors, about 5 billion US dollars, and World Bank $2 billion, African Development Bank about 600 million. What we owe to traditional lenders is now much less than what we owe to non-traditional lenders like China, like the African Import and Export Banks, and other other entities and so forth. Yeah, which makes now a debt resolution exercise, as Zambia saw recently, very difficult because in the past you had one framework,
Yes.
the YIPIC framework, the multilateral framework that could easily be handled by Washington, by the World Bank and the IMF. But now you've got other debtors that don't fit in the traditional debt framework and infrastructure. So you need dexterity, you need a cerebral approach, which is way beyond the abilities of Mthuli Ncube and this government, and that is the challenge. Then next, we need to deal with so many other issues, the social agenda. Right. There's poverty out there, and any decent government in Zimbabwe must actually issue social grants. You could start off with $30. South Africa does it, but we don't have the capacity and we're too dishonest. But the social agenda needs to be addressed. Then, of course, there's the issue of the agenda of climate proofing yourself. Right. It is a huge panoply of issues that needs to be done that are way beyond the capacity of this agenda of climate proofing yourself. Right. It is a huge panoply of issues that needs to be done that are way beyond the capacity of this government. Then, of course, gross capital formation. If you wake up someone who died in 1952, he won't get lost in Harare because by the change of names from Jameson Avenue to Samora Machel, I know there's Mbuyane and somewhere there, you won't get lost. There's hardly been any gross capital formation. Right. So these are some of the things that need to be addressed urgently. In 44 years after independence, you still have children that are walking 12 kilometers to school. We are celebrating independence in a few days' time on the 18th of April, but I would like to submit that to the majority of the ordinary Wananji is not yet Uhuru, is not yet independence. That is sad and regrettable.
Honorable, you spoke about the need to dollarize the economy. But if we look back a few years ago, when the economy was fully dollarized as a result of your government of national unity, there was a situation whereby there were cash shortages and people would sleep in queues. And hence the government said they would introduce the bond note to ameliorate that situation. And also there's been reports that since Zimbabwe is dollarized at that particular moment, companies within the region, like South Africa, which is a giant and which is a far bigger manufacturing capacity than Zimbabwe, tended to bring in their goods en masse and even make them very, very cheap so they can just easily access that US dollar because we don't have capacity to earn more than we actually buy from outside. So how would we solve the issue of currency shortages and other economies which are stronger coming to just basically wipe out the US dollar from the market?
I think the question you are missing is what caused the shortages. Remember how a bank works. You go and deposit your $10. Tino over there goes and deposits $10. So as long as there's no bank robber, my $10 should be there when I need it. Right. But what happened when I left government, I left a cash balance of $6.5 billion. But what happened, someone went and stole that. Just like now, the central government through the central bank went and stole that money and used it. As chair of the Public Accounts Committee, we did a forensic investigation on what happened. And we established that $4 billion had been taken by the government, form of overdraft and so forth. So once there's been a bank robber, it means your money is no longer in the bank. So when you go there, they won't give you because they don't have it. So the problem is not the US dollar. The problem is a government that can't live within its means, which then ends up stealing money that is being held in deposit. It happened that's why they introduced the bond note. Right. They introduced the bond note as cover of the money that they stole. And we woke up one morning, 1st of October 2018, and they published Exchange Control Directive R120 of 2018, in which they instructed banks to bifurcate accounts between Nostro RTGS and Nostro FCA. Why did Nostro RTGS arise? Nostro RTGS arose because they'd stolen money and we now had a fiat currency, a fictitious currency, which is the position now. We now have another fiat currency. So history is going to repeat itself. So the problem is not the use of currency. Countries use their currency.
Yeah, there it is, Zimbabwe. So Honorable Biti is not quitting politics. He's taken a sabbatical to do some activities and
he will
come back.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very important question because it's very true that Zimbabweans regard you as one of the most competent people, if I may say. And
thank you.
Some
don't flatter me.
No, it's true.
I'm too ugly to be flattered.
And also, a lot of people regard you as the best finance minister since independence.
Thank you. I appreciate
particularly
it.
us who probably grew up when you were the finance minister.
Yeah,
yes, we saw a serious change in the economy.
Thank you.
But do you think Zimbabwe lacks people of competence? Don't we have enough, particularly say in the ruling party, which happens to always be winning elections?
The good people in Zimbabwe, across the length and breadth, at the parliament they were young. Zanu Pf MPs. I don't want to mention them, some of them by name, because I'll put them under fire. You see, the thing is, everyone knows what needs to be done. Zanu Pf itself knows what needs to be done, but there's a gap now between what needs to be done and what ends up being done. And that gap is created by the fact that Zanu Pf has never put the interest of Zimbabwe first. Zanu Pf worships two things: the power retention agenda, power for power's sake, and the bottom line. What's in it for me? So it's about aggrandizement. It's about accumulation for the sake of accumulation. The state to Zanu Pf is an arena of personal accumulation. And those that are running the state on our behalf in Zanu Pf are just a phalanx of bandits in nice Savile Row suits. That is all, and that is the disaster.
Right. And I wanted to say, since you've been in politics for quite a while, and we have these problems that we have, and you as an opposition politician, leading one for that matter, you've tried to come in the space and probably remove Zanu Pf democratically, but it seems so far it hasn't worked. So
I think you're offside. We agree that we are discussing economics.
Yes.
Yeah, you're offside.
Yes. No, I'm trying probably to look at the economic aspect of the politics. That since it's not working out to remove Zanu Pf at the moment, maybe we can find solutions where people like you can actually probably work with the government. That is if it's possible.
It's not. Let me put it this way. Number one, democracy can't fail and will never fail, because by their very nature, individuals love democracy. What is democracy? It's making a choice. You are putting on a pink cross-red shirt. It's a choice you made. I am putting on a dress. It's a choice I made. And by the way, I've got many dresses. So I said I'm going to put on a white dress today. I'm going to have a lunch today. And I'm going to drink water. Others are going to drink sodas. It's a choice. That's why the surveys done by pollsters such as the Afrobarometer show that the overwhelming number of Africans, 76%, believe in democracy. One democracy. So, yes, our transition has been delayed. Our transition has been hijacked by a number of reasons, but there will be a democracy. Then you come to the issue of Zimbabweans working together. The Zimbabweans should work together. In the past 20 years, the best period of Zimbabwe's time was the government of national unity, when Morgan Tsvangirai, may he so rest in peace, and Ubaba President Robert Mugabe worked together. work together. You were just saying now we remember what you did. It was a collective effort. So, in my respectful opinion, people should have political differences, should belong to different political parties, just as we belong to different churches, but we all worship one God. We can call him Allah, we all worship one God. So here, what should bind us is the imperator and obligation of Zimbabwe. What is this creature called Zimbabwe? What are its constituent elements? What respect should we give to Zimbabwe? Regrettably, that is the problem. Those who call themselves nationalists are the least patriotic component of our country. They are selling our minerals, our diamonds, our gold, our platinum. They are the least patriotic. So the bottom line is that even though we've got a geographical entity known as Zimbabwe, the nation of Zimbabwe, which is a fabric of multiple voices with different shades of color, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. The average Zimbabwean feels alienated, feels reified, feels disillusioned. So there's a crisis of disillusionment, in this country. There's a crisis of fatalism. The reason why the prosperity church can't contain numbers is because people have lost all hope. So they hope the prophet or the pastor can give me a car, can give me a job, and so forth. The crisis of fatalism, the crisis of of hopelessness. Put in simple terms, the crisis of leadership. When everything is said and done, Zimbabwe suffers from an aggravated kwashiorkor of leadership, and that is the crisis of our generation.
Two more questions, Honorable Biti. The first one would be, there has been talk that the current president may, working with Parliament, he has denied it, to put on record that he wants to extend his term of office, but there has been talk by some people that he should extend his term. What do you think about the term extension? Is it possible within the current law?
Yeah, firstly, it would be a disaster for President Emmerson Mnangagwa to try and seek a third term. It will be a disaster. It will be a disaster. It will set this country on a matrix of instability. It will set this country possibly on civil war or another coup. We don't want that. We don't want that. So my biggest fear is a third term. My biggest fear is a third term, which will be a coup on the constitution, because the constitution is very rigid. There are terms of office. So I hope and pray that President Mnangagwa can respect that. He needs that for his own legacy anyway. So I hope that it won't happen. There are millions of Zimbabweans who can run this country. And we need to move away from the big man syndrome. And so let's allow the change of leadership. It will be great for our country. So to me, the biggest existential threat that Zimbabwe faces is the threat of a third term by Emmerson Mnangagwa. I pray and hope it won't happen.
Right. And last question now, Honorable Biti. There has been talk that since you've taken a sabbatical, you probably have received several, I would say, opportunities outside the country, and that you may be leaving the country soon. Could that be true, or perhaps it's just mere speculation?
Yeah, well, a lot of things are happening in my life, and and it is not a lie that I'm considering so many things, and it is not a lie that that I may board Ethiopian Airlines or the Emirates, but I hear there are floods in Dubai. But anyway, on a more serious note, I've taken a sabbatical from the political space, and I may be leaving Zimbabwe in due course.
Right. And lastly, your address to Zimbabweans with the current political, economic situation and the prolonged suffering that we've experienced, as well as probably a message to the rest of your colleagues in the opposition who still remain and are still in the trenches whilst we are in the sabbatical.
Well, I think, look, as we're doing this interview, electricity went off because of power outages. That's the nature of the life that we are living. Over 10 million people have to be fed in Zimbabwe because of the drought. Our people are suffering, surviving on sound. So I say to Zimbabweans, let's provide the agency. I say to Zimbabweans, aluta continua. To my colleagues in the opposition, you know I have not abandoned you, but you know that I have to do what what I did, which is basically announce my sabbatical. Please forgive me for that, but I had to do what I had to do. I'll come back with the recharged batteries, and we'll be back in the trenches in the not too distant future. I hope more united, I hope more democratic, and stronger in spirit because our people are suffering.